my kitchen to talk about what's cooking with Noah Blankenship, who is an MBA student at RIT with a specialization in digital marketing. And he also identifies as a member of the capital D deaf community. And Noah, just wanted to talk to you about your personal experiences during COVID and how it's going at RIT, just as a student, while we're social distancing on, Zoom learning and whatnot. So what has your experience been?
All right, sure, Val. I'm glad you actually brought up my identity, right, as a deaf person, a capital D deaf person. There's diversity within the deaf community, and there are some people who identify as hard of hearing, some people as deaf, more of like a medical perspective. But for me, capital D deaf, because I am a deaf person and identify strongly with that community. So I do take a coding course for digital marketing. And in that class, I've enjoyed myself so much, despite it, there being COVID and us. In the class, I typically sit in the front of the classroom, right? The interpreter's up there, and I like to have interaction with the professor, and everything's kind of at my disposal there. And so oftentimes also, I work very closely with the interpreter, and I learn on the go when coding, right? There's a lot of kind of instantaneous back and forth that happens communication-wise between the interpreter and myself. And the classes were 3 hours in person, but now they've been sort of abbreviated to 1 hour on Zoom, because the teacher knows that people can't do a 3-hour Zoom session. So for me, again, relying on a lot of interaction between me and the teacher, facilitated by the interpreter, now that's not an option. Then also, we've got a screen where the teacher's kind of showing the coding and explaining the coding, doing a lecture essentially remotely. And I'm seeing the teacher in a very small little window, and I'm trying to kind of watch what at the same time the coding, and it's been tough. It's been tough. There are minor glitches that can happen, and they actually got a third-party captioner involved because they know that RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology, can't afford that, and so the teacher was willing to reach out and get lectures captioned by a third-party captioner. Yeah, because although there is an interpreter also in the Zoom sessions, it can be tough. So let's say that you have the word great, okay? And you're reading it on my lips, great, and the sign is great, like this. But that sign also has a kind of cousin word, so to speak, like amazing or awesome, right? And all of those other synonyms in English can be interpreted with that same single sign. And so what the interpreters oftentimes will do is, when they'll be using classifiers or using other kind of linguistic devices to interpret these things, I'm looking at the coding, which is very, very specific, and how that's interpreted, and how I'm syncing up with watching the interpreter where they are in the lecture, but then also referencing where the teacher's referencing in the visual portion of the lecture, the slides or whatnot. It's tough to manage. And then there's all these other strategies that I use where if a teacher's using a particular word, they'll point that out, or the team interpreter will be sitting beside me. And so the team interpreter will actually kind of point visually to reference some of the highly technical terminology and jargon that's used in the class. And so some of those techniques, obviously, I can't use right now. And so that does make it challenging. Simply going to the grocery store is a different adventure, right? So I'll ask someone something typically, and they'll respond by using their voice, and I'll say, I'm deaf. And they are trying to speak louder than, and I say, how loud talk, not gonna help, I'm deaf, right? And so there are challenges in communication, and reading lips is something that happens in both directions. Typically, that now, there's a barrier there, literally, there's a map.
Literal barrier, yeah.
Right, exactly. And there is a kind of a cascading domino effect of different things that happen in communication just from that mask, you know. And yeah, it is. There's already a lot of barriers, and this is definitely a very, very literal one. So today, you know, I had a fall. I was playing with my dog, and I got a cut, and I was a little concerned about how deep it was and didn't know if I needed any additional care. So I went to urgent care because I'd rather be safe than sorry and get it checked out. And I was in luck because when I registered and went in and gave my insurance information and everything at the front desk, there was plexiglass, right, between the person at the front desk and myself. And so they weren't wearing a mask because there was this plexiglass. And so we were able to see clearly, interpreters just clarifying, because there was a mask and there was social distancing was in effect. There was no mask needed, which was really nice, right? Because I could see completely what they were communicating, and we had pretty effortless communication there. When the interpreter arrived, they did have a mask on. And I thought, well, it's awesome that the interpreter's here and that the interpreter knows what to do, right? Knows that they need PPE. And everything went really smoothly. But the PPE that the interpreter used allowed for that. It was particular. If they had a full, complete mask, I think it would have been harder. Instead, they had a little window. And so I obviously am relying more on grammatical information that's conveyed on the eyebrows and in the upper portions of the face.
Thank you. Thank you for that. One of the things that I have found very comforting during COVID is learning new recipes from people, just because for me, food is comforting, it's culture, it's so many things. And you have a recipe that you shared with us. Would you like to tell us about that?
Sure, yeah. And I did send a link here of the recipe. It's a good old clam chowder recipe that can't fail.
Good.
You know, it's a traditional food in Maine and Massachusetts. And I don't know if you know, historically Maine was part of Massachusetts before it kind of broke off from its own state. So yeah, little history lesson. It was quite some time ago that happened, obviously, but yeah, so this historic dish is one that I love. However, I am allergic to it, which is a little irony. But yeah, I used to order that all the time. It was my go-to. My mom knew that. And so now what I'll do is get corn chowder instead. Yeah, but still, I don't feel right giving a second-rate corn chowder recipe to our friends. You know, that's not a New England, culturally appropriate New England dish. I want to give you the real deal, and that is clam chowder. So luckily my allergy's not terrible, but when I go to a big event, like a wedding or a graduation, something like that, I can get a whiff of that clam chowder, and I just think someday, I'm gonna go. And I was tested actually a couple of years ago because over the years, my allergies, I'm hoping, will kind of dwindle, and then I can return to enjoying this delicious dish. But in the meantime, I just have to be satisfied with smelling it. But it always reminds me of home.
And of all of the recipes that you could have shared, the legal seafood recipe is truly the best. And yeah, when I go back to the East Coast and to Massachusetts, it's one of the first things that I order. So with that, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time, and good luck at RIT. And if you ever come out to Oregon, we'd love to show you around with your mask and appropriate social distancing.
Absolutely.
Want to see more What's Cooking with Val? Make sure to subscribe to our page by clicking the link.